Back in 2012, Barack Obama said that the mission in Afghanistan was effectively complete. We had trained the Afghan army to the extent that we could now safely leave and they could maintain everything. Bringing democracy to the Middle East. So now they're evacuating. There's an exodus of American military from Afghanistan, which is a good thing. And the Taliban is walking in. Since they have been leaving, there's videos emerging where the Afghan military just walks over and like hands over their arms and they're like shaking hands and the Taliban is just taking over. Now I'm going to tell you this. I don't like the idea. I don't like the Taliban, but we're not Afghanistan. Afghanistan is not a colony of America. Something is happening there. The U.S. shouldn't have gone there. It was $20 billion. It was a waste of time, money, and everything. And you know what? I have no F's to give. I'm sad about the people who are at risk. I think we should help those who have provided assistance to America. We have to recognize we made a mess. We are responsible for that mess. But at a certain point, let me just throw it to Dr. Ron Paul. If you prescribe a medication and it turns out to be wrong, you don't keep them on the same medication. Afghanistan was a mistake. We have to leave. There may be withdrawal from the withdrawal, but I think that's something that was going to happen no matter what. So what do? Stay there indefinitely? Well, now, because of the disaster, and I blame Joe Biden for this, and I'll explain. They're going to be sending in, what are they saying, 6,500 troops, 3,000 troops to be temporarily deployed to the capital of Kabul to help evacuate the embassy. Okay, they better get out. And then I think they're putting 3,500 in, outlying areas on standby. They're sending in more troops. How much you want to bet? Something goes down and the embassy goes bad. And then Joe Biden's like, we can't leave. This is an affront to America. And he tries to find a way to just keep us in Afghanistan and keep that place functioning like some kind of pseudo colony or just direct colony, I guess. I'm not about it. I think about all the complaints from the left, the complaints that I actually recognize, like Flint water pipes, which I understand have been fixed. But there's a lot of bad infrastructure in this country. There are a lot of homeless people. I know you can't solve homelessness with just throwing money at the problem, but we could use the money we waste overseas. I got an idea. How about instead of building infrastructure in Afghanistan, a country that is not America, we build infrastructure here in America? How about we use all that money that we spent, the billions of dollars? What is it, like 80, 90 billion dollars, some ridiculous number? How about all of that money just to be spent here in America, helping the lives of Americans? So I don't know what to expect from this, but I can tell you that I think it is Joe Biden's fault. Why? Jack Posobiec and Sean Parnell made really good points. Actually, I want to read you their full statements, but basically, before we get into this, let me just say, Donald Trump set a deadline, May 1st. That's when we will be out. Joe Biden delayed this. Now, what we're hearing from Jack and Sean Parnell is that this gave the Taliban time to plan an offensive, to go in and just take over. Perhaps you can argue they had Trump announced we were leaving. They had all that time to plan their offensive. Yes. It also means that Joe Biden had extra time as well to plan a safe evacuation. I think ultimately the problem, I'm not going to act like it's 100% Biden's fault. George W. Bush gets us in this mess. Trump was trying to get us out of this mess. Biden is now actually following through, and I think he's doing kind of a bad job. But I'm not going to say it's entirely his fault. It is probable, nay, extremely probable, in my opinion, 95% chance this would have happened no matter what. So I'm not blaming Biden for the fact all this is happening, but I am throwing some shade his way because he gave himself extra time to prepare for this. How is it that we didn't get our people out of the embassies when you gave yourself extra time? It makes no sense. And now you're going to send more troops back? I'm sorry. Trump isn't the president right now. Biden is. And Biden gave himself 3 extra months. He could have used that time to get Americans out of the embassies, as well as the other embassies like the Canadian embassy, whatever else is going on. He didn't. Here's the news. Actually, you know what? I want to pause. I'm going to read the news. I also want to throw some serious shade at Mitch McConnell and Adam Kinzinger and the GOP establishment and the garbage Republican Party who are now saying, like, we need more troops in Afghanistan. Shut your mouths, scumbags. Man, let me read the news. Let me slow down. Guys, I'm sad to hear about what's happening so far. I'm extremely happy to hear we are getting out. I am worried about them sending in more troops. They call it temporarily. I don't care. I don't want to play these games. I'm not happy with that. But I think we're still looking at a major net positive. We've got some good news. We are getting out of Afghanistan. We are stopping this ridiculous waste of time, energy, and money. Because even if you think that we should be in there after 20 years, how much money was spent training the Afghan military and they just surrender immediately? Yeah, great expenditure. No, it was lining the pockets of contractors. Here's a story from CNBC. Taliban seized two of Afghanistan's largest cities as U.S. sends troops to evacuate embassy staff. The Taliban overtook two of Afghanistan's largest cities, the latest conquests for the insurgents who are rapidly wresting control of the country just weeks before the U.S. was set to complete its withdrawal of troops there. Islamist militants captured Kandahar, the second most populous city in the country, as well as the third largest city in Herat. Third largest city of Herat. Citing NBC reports citing a Taliban spokesman. The insurgents have now seized at least half of Afghanistan's 34 provincial capitals, taking control of roughly 2/3 of the nation and encircling Kabul, where the U.S. embassy is preparing to evacuate all but its core diplomatic personnel. Now, I guess Joe Biden has asked the Taliban to allow our people to get out of this embassy, and I think it would be in the best interest of the Taliban to just stand back and let America leave. Otherwise, we're going to get more troops. And that's what's happening. President Biden, who in April announced that all U.S. forces in the region would be withdrawn by September 11th, on Thursday, ordered 3,000 troops be temporarily deployed to the capital to help evacuate embassy personnel. The troops are expected to arrive within 24 to 48 hours. And I'll stress this too. I missed this on the first go. When Biden announced he was going to have a full withdrawal by September, I was like, awesome. And I had completely gone over my head that Trump had ordered it by May. Biden was extending our deployment in Afghanistan. Man, what a trash president. Afghan government security forces have crumpled, and many civilians have fled their homes amid the Taliban's surprisingly swift advance toward the nation's power center. But the White House on Friday morning said Biden stands by his decision to end the U.S. presence in Afghanistan after nearly 2 decades of fighting in the wake of the 9/11 attacks. The president is firmly focused on how we can continue to execute an orderly drawdown and protect our men and women serving in Afghanistan. You heard him earlier this week. He does not regret his decision. You mean Trump's decision? In addition to the deployment of 3 infantry battalions from the Marines and Army to Kabul, a U.S. infantry brigade will be positioned on standby in Kuwait. Another 1,000-member unit comprising Army and Air Force personnel will deploy to Qatar to help process special immigrant visas for Afghan nationals who assisted U.S. and NATO troops during the war. Nevertheless, Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said Thursday that the U.S. still expects to fully withdraw all troops by the end of August. Britain said Thursday it will send about 600 troops to help its citizens leave Afghanistan, where about 4,000 UK nationals are believed to be stationed. Canada is also deploying special forces to the country to evacuate staff in the Canadian embassy in Kabul. They say this is developing news. Check back. I want you to understand something. I don't like the Taliban. I don't like their ideology. I don't like the things they do to people. I look at these old photos of Afghanistan back in the 60s and 70s, and I'm like, man, it looks great. Cosmopolitan and somewhat classically liberal, many Western values expressed. And then you get these militants, these Islamists who come in and subjugate women and shut down personal liberties and institute authoritarian theocracy. I am not a fan of that. That being said, you always need to try and think about things from whatever different perspective you can. I want you to think about what's happening right now. The Taliban was in control of this country. The United States goes in, all based on garbage, lies, and misinformation. And probably just because, in my opinion, I think the U.S. wanted Iran. So if you look at a map, you can see Iraq and Afghanistan on the border surrounding Iran, putting up all our military bases around Iran. And then you get John Bolton saying, oh, man, I'm sure he was crying about this one. Because he said it a couple of years ago, I think. By this time next year, we'll be celebrating in Tehran. Yeah. Loser. These people are insane, okay? It's militaristic conquest. It's stripping of resources. It has nothing to do with this country. At least it shouldn't. But I think about what it must be like to be in Afghanistan, to have the United States just come in and take over. Think about what that must have been like, regardless of whether or not the system is good or bad. You've got all of a sudden this occupying force, and they don't know you, and they don't trust you, and they are not elected by you. They don't represent you. To be fair, I don't think the Taliban is better, but I'm just saying there were probably a lot of people. It was probably not as if everybody greeted us as liberators, right? So then you have these people deciding, I'm going to work with the Americans, an occupying force. It is estimated that 47,000 or so civilians died in this. Now, again, it's war. I understand. We should not have gone there in the first place. It was a huge mistake. It was a mistake to stay. And now you have the Taliban coming in. So I tell you this, what to consider. The Taliban is going to view each and every one of those people who helped the United States as traitors. And I get it. I hope these people are safe. I hope the Taliban has some measure. I'm not entirely convinced they will. As much as I love this country, I think it is fair to say we have a war addiction. And it is just, to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely. The U.S. has the means and the capability to just walk in and do whatever they want. And that is a problem. Now we are finally getting out. Let me show you something, because we're going to throw some shade at Joe Biden, but just a little bit. Like I said, I'm not an insane tribalist. Joe Biden is not the one who announced the complete withdrawal, and Joe Biden isn't the person who got us in there in the first place, though I can't say the Democratic establishment. Well, hold on a minute. He wasn't president. He did vote for these things in the Senate. So you know what? I'll throw some shade his way for sure, but a lot of blame goes around to a lot of people. In this regard, the problem I see is that there was an extra amount of time that he gave himself. Why didn't he have the troops centered in around Kabul to get the embassies clear for all these other countries, for the UK, for Canada, instead of then going, oh no, look what's happening. Are you daft? Did you really believe the Taliban wouldn't just come back? We were told this over and over and over again. When I had Sean Parnell on the show, we talked about it. He says, I think you need a small presence. He may have been talking about Iraq, to be honest. The general idea you typically hear is we need a small presence in these countries to prevent things like this from happening. We don't want a full military deployment. You just need some leadership to help support the Afghan security forces, who have completely crumpled in the wake of our exodus. Now, maybe there's a lot of conservatives and their view is we could have kept in a couple hundred commanders. Maybe that's an argument. I don't think we should be occupying any of these countries. We get out and perhaps preventing destabilization and the Taliban coming in. It's not just that they're taking these cities. It's that they're seizing American military equipment. That is insane. But I don't know. At the end, I can just say I can be mad about whatever. You can complain about whatever. We are getting out good. If we can reap the consequences of America's failed actions. Jack Posobiec said Trump warned Biden not to break the deal with the Taliban to withdraw by May 1st. Biden immediately broke that deal on April 18th. Trump said, I wish Joe Biden wouldn't use September 11th as the date to withdraw our troops from Afghanistan for two reasons. First, we can and should get out earlier. 19 years is enough. In fact, far too much and way too long. He was right. I made early withdrawal possible by already pulling much of our billions of dollars of equipment out. And more importantly, reducing our military presence to less than 2,000 troops from the 16,000 level that was there. Likewise, in Iraq, and 0 troops in Syria, except for the area where we kept the oil. Oh, Trump. Secondly, September 11th represents a very sad event and period for our country and should remain a day of reflection and remembrance, honoring those great souls we lost. Getting out of Afghanistan is a wonderful and positive thing to do. I plan to withdraw on May 1st, and we should keep as close to that schedule as possible. This was in April. Donald Trump made the deal while he was in office. This meant the Taliban had advanced notice, warning of when America would be leaving. They had more than enough time to plan. The issue is, so did Joe Biden. So that's why I'm saying he should have prepared for this. I'll tell you, if Donald Trump was president, I think we'd still see a lot of the same thing. I just think it's right to get out. I think if Trump was president, we don't exactly know. We would see the Taliban coming in and all that stuff. And so I can just say, Biden, you accepted the mantle, and now you must take responsibility for not having a plan for this. Sean Parnell, running for Pennsylvania Senate, says, this is exactly the point I made on Sean Hannity. Biden pushed back President Trump's May timeline for withdrawal to 9/11 for political reasons and gave the Taliban extra time to plan their counteroffensive. Biden and our woke generals failed all of us. He's right. He is right. Like I said, giving them extra time also means giving us extra time. If they're now talking about sending 3,000 troops to Kabul, more than who are already there, it strikes me as very strange, doesn't it? Trump says he brought the troop level down to about 2,000 or less. And now they're sending 3,000. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? If they had extra time, we had extra time, they could have absolutely just said, we're going to withdraw our forces to the Capitol to evacuate the embassy, and then we're out. Instead, they leave. There's military equipment still there. They had months to plan for that. And now the embassy's at risk. Now they got to send more troops. You know, let me just give a shout out to the dumpster fire of a political party, the Republican Party. Adam Kinzinger. I love how people call like McConnell. They call McConnell and they call like Kinzinger and Liz Cheney Republicans in name only, rhinos. I should need to explain something to you guys. They're not the rhinos. Rand Paul's a rhino. Thomas Massey's a rhino. Why? Because when it comes to what the Republican establishment does, it's garbage. They're all garbage. Garbage in, garbage out. When you look at Massey and Rand Paul, they do really well. So they are not in line with the establishment majority of Republicans. No, the Republican Party is garbage. And you have some libertarians who have run for office as Republicans, and they are Republican in name only. You know why? Because the Republican Party is not a principled party. Adam Kinzinger says, the Taliban used to say, America has the watches, we have the time. Yet again, we see a disaster in the making, not because we were defeated, but because we gave up. America only loses a war when we choose to. Between Trump and Biden, they own this. Shut your mouth, you spineless loser. Adam Kinzinger is the worst of the worst. We gave up. You know what? I will give credit to Biden for getting us out. Now, we'll see what happens with this 3,000 deployment, because he's probably just putting us right back in. Sure. Trump actually tried pulling the troops out. And now you get garbage in, garbage out McConnell. McConnell demands Biden commit to sending more troops back to Afghanistan. Oh, it's just great. This is what you get when you vote for Republicans. You know, this is why I'm not happy with either party. And I get these people saying, Tim, you have to support the Republicans, otherwise the Democrats win. I'm like, yes, but then Mitch McConnell is like, more troops in Afghanistan. You know what, man? I loathe these parties and these people. Trump was different. That's why I voted Republican in the last election, because Trump was pulling our troops out of Afghanistan. And now we're left with this scum. They want more troops. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. How does Kentucky have Rand Paul and Mitch McConnell? Man, I tell you. McConnell called Biden's Afghanistan policy reckless and said that if the administration does not move to send additional troops to back up Afghanistan forces to the U.S. embassy in Kabul could fall to insurgent groups. Now we know he is going to be sending more troops. I'm just saying it's the uniparty, man. Mitch McConnell and Biden, they're all about this. They're together. They want the same thing. Here's how it works. The Democrats are the sledgehammer and the cudgel, and the Republicans are the people pretending to be the resistance. The Republicans are like, I can't believe that they would do this. Quick, vote for me. And we're like, yes, Republicans. And then they go to sleep. And then when they get power in 2016-18, what do? They actually come out like, well, maybe we should look into this Russia stuff. That's the Republican Party you vote for. I don't know, tell you guys, the Libertarian Party is whacked out of its mind too, except for the Mises Caucus, and Dave Smith's a pretty smart guy. Maybe that will be our saving grace if we can actually rally enough people to vote for libertarians, but I don't know what to tell you. You know, I think with Dave Smith, what's working with the Mises Caucus is that they have sound mind. They are not into all this woke insanity. They're what works for conservatives. They happen to be pro-life, which is interesting for libertarians. And I think it's just the anti-establishment, anti-uniparty, and anti-war. But the problem with the rest of the Libertarian Party is that they're all on board for wokeness. No joke. Jo Jorgensen, she tweeted it out. So what am I going to do? Am I going to vote for these people? I guess the only option is to find a good Republican. So I'll say this. There is hope, my friends. What we are seeing now is the right-wing populist insurgency. You've got people who are right populists. They're for the working class. They're for bringing back our jobs, for securing our borders, school choice. And they're now running in larger and larger numbers. It's time to get the uniparty out of office. The problem? Democrats, the progressive Democrats just fall in line. They have faux... You've got certain political channels on YouTube and stuff, and they pretend to be progressive anti-establishment, but they're as pro as establishment as you get, and these young people just walk blindly behind them. At least the right populists are like, we don't want this. We're going to challenge that system. So I'll tell you what, I've said it before and I'll say it again. There was a point where I defended Nancy Pelosi, no joke, a couple of years ago, because I thought that the squad was insane with their demands. And I'm like, look, take the lady who's like slow roll it. Now I'm like, nah, you know what? I've thought about it. I'd rather have AOC over Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi is apparently going to be stepping down in the next year or so because she is uniparty establishment trash. AOC is probably, I should say this. I think AOC and Pelosi are basically the same thing. I would take a progressive Democrat over these establishment uniparty shills. I think AOC is a shill. I think she feigns some kind of populist rhetoric, but in reality, she'll fall in line with the establishment at a moment's notice. You take a look at what the Republicans are pulling out with Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene and stuff, and I'm like, they're telling the establishment to shove off. We need more of this. We need actual people to restore the will of the people to our government, because we are a corporatocracy, whatever you want to call it, an oligopoly, a corporatist oligopoly. Ultra wealthy individuals propping up their friends, sending our young men and women in uniform to die for what? Cold hard profit, American exceptionalism, and democracy building. No, that's insane. It's all insane. And the funny thing is, the mainstream media loves this stuff. Now you've got the Republicans coming out. So I tell you this. Donald Trump was something different. Ron DeSantis is pretty good. I'm not gonna get behind McConnell ever. McConnell and Lindsey Graham are awful, and I've said that for a long time. Tucker Carlson came out and said it too. These people need to get voted out. Rand Paul is awesome, far from perfect, but he's one of my favorite. You know what? I'll say this. I basically hate all politicians. There's like 5 that I'm like, yeah, they're all right. And I think like they mostly tend to be Republicans because the libertarians run as Republicans. Rand Paul does a great job. And full disclosure, I just donated to his campaign because he's, I think, one of the most important people we have in Congress, telling people to stand up for themselves, rejecting authoritarianism, trying to filibuster. He is like, it's like a light in the darkness, huh? Far from perfect, I'll tell you that. But I've always been a big fan of him and his dad. And because of liberty, because of freedom, because of individualism. And I'm not a right libertarian, but I will gladly accept a bunch of right libertarians saying, leave me alone and I'll leave you alone, over the authoritarian crackpots on the left or the right. And that's why I think he does a good job. As for Biden and the rest, I'll give Biden credit for getting the troops out. I'm going to issue a stern warning about them deploying even more troops. The Republicans want this too. We've got to do something. I think we have a great opportunity in 2022 to send a message to Washington by electing populists, people who care about the will of the people and not the elite cronies. That's what I'm talking about. And that may be I wish there were some moderate Democrats that were populists, but they keep just falling in line to the collective and the establishment. I'd gladly accept them. So I'll take the Republicans because at the very least, I know that the more libertarian individuals will leave me alone and they'll stop doing this. I tell you what, to all these Democrats, if you want to complain about the Republican agenda, maybe you should have fought harder with the rest of us to end this war garbage. Because I will tell you this, one of the biggest things I often complain about is foreign policy, because it is clear cut across the board. We can argue about domestic policy. We can argue about, parental leave and things like that, and we'll make our points. Come to me and tell me why we're in Afghanistan, and I have not heard my entire life a good reason other than we're wasting money and people are dying. So when I'm looking at something, I'm like, that's something I can clearly point to and be like, why? For what? To hold the region so China doesn't take it? Maybe. But I do not believe the ends justify the means. This utilitarianism, I'm not a fan of it. So you know what? I'm happy to see the troops leaving. I hope they stay safe. I hope everybody in Kabul can get out safely. Hopefully this is a temporary deployment. The uniparty establishment politics of this country, we need to make a change, a serious change. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.